It's another Friday, and it's another edition of the Zogby Report, real and unscripted. You know what we do if you've been watching or listening. I gather together every Friday with my son, Jeremy, and my boss, managing partner at John Zogby Strategies. And what we do is we discuss some of the hot topics of the week and try to leave them cooler as opposed to hotter. That's been our drill, hasn't it, Jerry?
It has, although you're senior partner, I'm still just middle management. And speaking of cooler, after this, I'm going to go back out and shovel for the second time. Hopefully this time it won't be an hour, but I got most of the ice out.
And I'm not. So once again, we cancel each other out. Okay, so I thought I would, I've been in a board meeting all morning, and so I just started to think about this. I'm glad to discuss a topic that I really know very little about, except impressionistically. So we know that cryptocurrency is here, and it is not simply the wave of the future. The future is here. It is. It's a reality. We also know that social media, the genie is out of the bottle and it exists, and it is also the wave of the future, whatever forms those futures take. But right now we are in the midst of a severe crisis in both. With cryptocurrency, we have a Bernie Madoff-like scandal that is huge, with this young fellow Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX, and a scam that is of almost unbelievable proportions. As you and I talk, he is in custody, been denied bail, and his prospects, frankly, don't look very good. In the world of social media, it's all about Twitter. And I mean, Mark Zuckerberg had his day, but what's going on with Twitter since the Elon Musk purchase is, it looks like almost daily scandals, so I'll put that in quotes, with Elon Musk in what appears to be total control, banning folks from Twitter because they've either opposed him or they've done their job, or they're reporters who he doesn't particularly care for major mainstream media. So I want to ask you, is this an existential moment for crypto and Twitter? Are these just temporary blips on the screen that will be sorted out maybe sooner rather than later? Is this something we should even be concerned about, just the normal scheme of things whenever there's a dramatic change in technologies? I mean, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that, you hear the term watershed, right? And to me, I interpret watershed as anywhere from a watershed moment is once in a generation, or once in a century, or maybe twice in a century. I think we're beyond watershed. Then you're getting into epochal, right? That's anywhere from, one of those once in every 500 or once every 1,000 year moments. I tend to think we may be in something akin to that. I think beyond watershed. And but it's in so many things. And you brought up the world of finance and money, and you brought up media, messaging, and the flow of information. And to me, the lens that I like to kind of step back and analyze it all is through the notion of power versus markets. Mm-hmm. That technology or that product or service or that sector, either in fewer hands of more powerful or more distributed. And so I think that's a good way to understand what Bitcoin and what crypto is. I don't really understand I haven't read the white paper on Bitcoin written by the mysterious founder Satoshi. But the way I understand it is, you look at money throughout centuries, and money has played an incredible role in civilization.
Mhm.
And there's fiat money, there's money that's dictated by the government, and then there's money that emerges from the market. And if it, and FTX is a scandal worth looking at. I think it's more to me, and I haven't done this yet, but I want to. It's just so much to follow. For me, FTX, what would be interesting would be to follow the money trail. Who were these people, and Sam and his girlfriend, and who were the early investors? Who were the people that were key in bringing this about? I don't think that FTX should define all of crypto, because I think Bitcoin is pretty solid. It fluctuates a lot, but it's still at $17,000, and a lot of people are moving towards it, and it does have the potential to be a competing form of money in the market. But
So let me just stop you for a second with a question, and the question is about timing. That you have almost an entire age cohort. Those of us of a certain age who know very little about this, except that it exists. And this is in many ways the first huge introduction about crypto. For those who may be skeptical about change, worried about security of the future, still heavily reliant on old money, old forms of currencies, still highly, let's say, nationalistic. This could be a watershed moment in terms of generating a crisis of confidence, which no new technology really needs. You have to have a certain level of confidence, particularly in currency, to move forward. Is this that watershed moment of a serious crisis in confidence?
well,
Let's stick with currency for now. We'll get to Twitter later.
yeah, well, so I'm listening, and I was kind of building up to a point, and
Yeah.
your question is still relevant to the point I'm building up to. But so the media hype is FTX, and then there was another one, Lunar, and now there's the issue with Binance, which is the selling, trading, holding platform. And the world of crypto is so big; it's multi-billions. I mean, it'd be like an analogy could almost be like, look at in a stock index and see some big fish in there tanking. Does that mean get out of the index? You know what I mean? So what I'm trying to say is, so much attention is being negatively focused on crypto in general, that it's almost like it's trying to spill over into spoiling the image of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin has a huge following. And, people like to say that this is just a millennial thing. One of the biggest mouthpieces, I don't mean to be negative, one of the biggest cheerleaders for Bitcoin is a guy named Max Keiser. And Max Keiser is in his 60s, and he made hundreds of millions off of crypto. And there are other people too. But here's the thing. Regarding crisis of confidence, now you're seeing the narrative being introduced in the media for this notion of a centralized digital currency, which is the centralized form of blockchain. Blockchain is the infrastructure for cryptocurrency. And so, going back to power versus markets, that theme, crypto is the market. It's decentralized. There's competition. The CBDC, central bank digital currency, which a lot of nations are talking about doing, would end cash, would make currency digital, and it would be entirely in the hands of either the Treasury or the Federal Reserve, and you would have no more cash. There'd be no more anonymity, and that's really the backdrop to the discussion. Do we want the end of cash? Because it's being talked about. It's being talked about more and more worldwide, and to transition into a digital currency that the government can see everything that you do, or do we want to maintain? Do we want to let the forces of competition play out? And I think that's the central question here.
And you're right. And that makes this then that drives this conversation forward. We're having this conversation maybe a bit earlier than planned, and a whole lot earlier than a lot of us are prepared for. And in other words, some of us are starting the conversation before we know much of anything about where it all stands.
Yeah.
So a larger question then is, are we not heading towards centralization anyway? I mean, currency is just one aspect of this, simply because increasingly it's a borderless world. I mean, it's hard to fathom that, but you have tremendous movement of people. You have supply chains that cross, 19th and early 20th century borders anyway, that render old nation states less and less relevant. You have a growing number of quote unquote global citizens, at least mentally, and you have global problems, not only regulation of currencies, but issues like climate change and immigration regulation and so on, that are just so transnational that they can't be dealt with ad hoc country by country or small coalitions of countries. So isn't this just inevitable then that that there's some form of global centralization or regulation?
Well, there's definitely a desire to move in that direction. It's just whether it's going to be successful or would be a huge failure.
So
And what's that?
Oh, you finish your point, but what would the alternative be? And I'd like to know that. But finish your point. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean the alternative would be don't whatever forces are at play, whatever. Let me keep it simple. Don't centralize the resources in fewer hands, because now you're just giving more power to bureaucracy. And if Twitter is any analogy in this or any insight, what happened with Twitter is there was no oversight. Twitter was allowed with free reign to work behind the scenes with the Department of Homeland Security, with the FBI, the intelligence community, and the White House. And through these Twitter files, which you can read, either Bari Weiss, who is releasing these Twitter files, they got together with lawyers and they scanned through all the documents. After Elon took ownership of Twitter, he had access to all these files, and a legal team with a team of journalists are going through them, and they're revealing what was going on behind the scenes of the Twitter leadership leading up to 2016 elections, leading up to 2020, where they're intervening with institutions like the White House. That makes Watergate look like child's play. Okay, the White House is in tandem with Twitter executives and Twitter leadership, saying, get rid of these ideas, get rid of these stories. And you can read about it through Matt Taibbi, the Twitter files, or Bari Weiss, the Twitter files. And so that's what happens when these forces on the corporate side and the government side work together. And so if that's any window of insight into what would happen with finance, where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve, remember, the Federal Reserve is called federal, but it's a private corporation. If they work in tandem to basically have complete oversight of transactions, that is, somebody has to say, whoa, all right, we're listening to the talking points on why this is good, which obviously come from the White House and the places like the Treasury and the Fed and other central banks and institutions like the IMF and World Bank who are pushing these things at the global level. But then we also have to say, what are the pitfalls? What are the inevitable abuses of power? And so we have to have that conversation 360. We can't just focus on this is where it's going. It's going to be great because there's chaos and it's going to benefit us. It's not necessarily so.
So we've had this kind of conversation on different subjects many times. So I go back to my freshman economics professor, Dr. Kenny. You know, the desire to acquire becomes the urge to merge, and from there, then you get regulation. That there is almost a law of nature that when there is competition, yes, you may have some efficiencies, but you also have winners and losers. And what happens is the winners then make the rules, and the losers fall by the wayside. So you're going to have that centralization, that centralized effect. You know, you deregulated airlines. What happened? You went from umpteen airlines down to 4 or 5 airlines. Decentralized banking. What happened? You lost a zillion community banks in the process, and you're left with a market, you know, dominated by behemoths. So what happens then with cryptocurrency? For that matter, what happens with Twitter when, in effect, whether there's regulation or no regulation, you're going to end up with probably the same group of winners who are dictating the process anyway.
Well, I mean, key in this is an interpretation of what regulations are, and then also transparency. I mean, talking about what you said in the view of your economics professor, I mean, I'm trying to understand how a more competitive market leads up to fewer hands. How does competition, ensuring competition, when we know regulations have a tendency to benefit those who lobby for them, how does that transfer wealth? How has Main Street suffered, and banks on Wall Street and those institutions that are close to Wall Street and close to the Federal Reserve have increased trillions of dollars? How has that happened as a result of competition, and allowing for more players to compete in the market? I would say it's the result of intervention and regulation, because we know that since the Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates and has used quantitative easing to inject more money into the economy, since the crash of 2008, trillions of dollars have moved to the 0.1%. I just don't see how that's the result of decentralization. That's the result of centralizing forces through government intervention and through regulations lobbied for by the institutions that want them to benefit.
Well, I won't beat a dead horse. I'll just state that it has become almost a law of nature that when you have competition, let's call it pure competition, you have a centralizing effect anyway. There are those who win, then there are those who win even bigger, those who lose, and those who will lose even more. And in the final analysis, then you have a few that are in control, a few that then decide to write the rules, whether they are, those rules are embodied in governmental practices or just in the rules of engagement. And then there is no incentive for me to say, oh, I've got a better way of doing meat packing, or I've got a better way of communicating via social media. Where's my incentive if I know I'm going to lose? The winners have already won. Meanwhile, who's going to take care of the losers? You can't say, well, they can go out and find a $15 an hour job. That's what they're left to do anyway. Somebody has to step in and assist those who not only lose in the competition, but lose, just simply lose, the ones who, are left with the lower incomes, the lower prospects.
So,
I'm saying government.
so meanwhile, we've had nothing but nonstop intervention since 2008, and the losers are still losing, and they're losing big, and they're losing bigger. Now, a real insight into all of this is the world of farming. And there are farmers, small farmers are disappearing.
Yeah.
And that's not because it's a competitive market. Any farmer will tell you that they're dominated by Chicago. Mm-hmm. And what they'll also tell you is that it's no world for small family farms and medium-sized family farms, that what keeps them up at night more than the weather are the regulators, who don't really know or don't always understand their business, and even more so come in with a set of regulations that fit, the Cargills and the Purdue's of the industry, and don't really apply to the small and medium family size farms. So they have to abide by the one size fits all set of rules that really is just working for the big dogs, because the big dogs lobbied for that. And so now you begin to get some insight into how those interventions and regulations actually have the exact opposite effect of what they're intended to do. And we see this throughout history. We see it with the war on poverty, the war on drugs, the war on terror, the Fed's intervention since 2008. Every time they create a war on something and say it's in the name of the public good, the big players in those industries always get richer. And this isn't a result of more competition. It's a result of not allowing for smaller enterprises to compete into the market, to get into the market. It's so difficult to go into business tomorrow. If somebody has the capital for business or the access to a loan, they should be able to go into business, not literally tomorrow, but quickly. And that's just not the case. That's not the case with restaurants. That's not the case with anything. It can take months and months and months and months of hurdles that are very expensive. And I'm not saying that there's a perfect solution. I'm just saying that we need to start thinking about, there has been no shortage of regulations and interventions. They grow by the year, and they're not living up to what they promise and helping the little guy. The little guys are almost non-existent.
There's no disagreement here. Let's move on to Elon Musk and Twitter. Is this a bad dream that's turned into a worse nightmare? I mean, in your terms, the centralization of this powerful form of media, in both of our terms, in the hands of somebody that doesn't know the first thing about the topic of the company or the product of the company that he bought. I mean, this guy's an inventor. He's not a media executive. What is going on there? Should we be worried?
Well, I mean, we shouldn't necessarily 100% trust Elon Musk, but the story goes that he's been becoming increasingly. So, I mean, he comes from a liberal background. He comes from a progressive background, but you see this, and I noticed this in our polling a lot. There is a growing sentiment within the Democratic Party. I estimate anywhere from a fifth to a third of Democrats who don't like the path that the current leadership at the DNC are bringing them. And so some liberal-minded people on the West Coast, like, for example, Elon Musk, are starting to see things differently. They don't like the cancel culture. They don't like this notion that, oh, that pesky freedom of speech, that it's dated, it's dangerous. And they're saying, no, on the contrary, in times like these, we need freedom of speech, except for obviously when it's directly trying to threaten the life of somebody, which, by the way, that's why he shut down that Twitter account that was tracking his jet. I mean, he was saying, I don't want it to be revealed to the public where I'm heading to. I've dealt with stalkers before. But anyway, so he comes in and buys Twitter, which he started to understand was basically a not-for-profit organization that was working in tandem with the White House and the DNC and the intelligence community, shutting out whoever they wanted to. And so I think there's part narcissism where he likes the attention. I do believe that, I'll take him at his word, he had concern for the direction of cancel culture and freedom of speech. I'm not saying he's a hero, but he's doing something. He's releasing the information that's kept from the public. We go on social media and we're visible, but what about the executives in the boardroom behind the scenes? They're not visible. Well, now Elon Musk is saying, now you can see what they've been doing, and that's a free society.
All right. Well, for me, the rule is very simple. I don't tweet anyway. So, and I feel liberated. Okay, I think we aired it out. Anything you want to add?
No, I'm actually feeling optimistic about going into next year. I'm not saying they're not going to be challenges. I mean, the last couple of years were anything. There certainly are going to be challenges, but I don't know. I'm feeling like we're closing the year off strong. So,
all right, good. Let's leave on that note.
I hope that everybody else has the chance to think and feel that way.
So let's leave on that note. I think we aired it out, and we'll see you when we see you. Take care.
Happy holidays and Happy New Year.